It's now 7:30, so good evening, everybody, and thank you all for joining. As usual, video meeting rules will apply, and you'll all be muted very shortly. If those that are invited to speak could unmute themselves, and also if you wish to answer questions, you could unmute as well. Could I first invite Peter Blaskos to share with us this evening his always relevant words of wisdom? Peter.
Thought for today. Yes, good evening, everyone. Am I audible? That's the first thing.
Yes, you are, Peter.
Good evening. May we all give thanks for the chance to meet with you here on Zoom, our friends to greet. We're now able to dine out, but actually out, with tents of flapping. We enjoy people about. We're privileged tonight to have Robert here, visiting his far-flung outpost of Hertfordshire. Even on Zoom, we can enjoy Rotary at its best. So now let us welcome our distinguished guest. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter. It now gives me my great honour to introduce Her Majesty's Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire, Robert Voss. Lord Lieutenant, I now invite you to unmute, which I see you have done, and we look forward to listening to you, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon, and good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. And good evening, High Sheriff, and good evening, Deputy Lieutenant Susie Harvey, who's also with us. Keeping an eye on me, I think, and making sure I'm giving you a decent run for your money. I was last addressed you in, I'm amazed, it's actually March 2018, so it's over 3 years ago, when I was very kindly invited by Gordon to join you for dinner, and things have certainly moved on a little bit since then. And I apologize if what I say, or some of what I say, is repetitive, and those who were with us 3 years ago may recall some of the words. I've tried to change them a little bit, so please do excuse me. So a lot of people don't know anything about the role of the lieutenancy, and particularly the Lord Lieutenant. I always say, I think if you stopped 100 people in most of the major high streets in Hertfordshire and said, what do you know about the lieutenancy? Probably 90 or 95 would look at you fairly blankly and not know what you're talking about. So I thought I'd just give a bit of background to the history, first of all, of the lieutenancy. And we have with us the High Sheriff, as you've heard, and a lot of people confuse the High Sheriff and the Lord Lieutenant. The High Sheriff's role is actually, I believe, one of the oldest, if not the oldest, civil role in the country, dating back to Norman times. The role of the lieutenancy was created in the 1540s by Henry VIII. Basically, he was concerned with uprisings of various types around the country, and he appointed what were known as lieutenants. And the word lieutenant actually means standing in for. Appointed lieutenants all around the country. Each county had its own lieutenant. And the other thing, and perhaps the High Sheriff ought to cover his ears at this stage, although he is of course a deputy lieutenant as well, is to oversee what the High Sheriffs were doing, because the High Sheriffs were the collectors of taxes, and they were always quite wealthy men, and I leave you to draw your own conclusion to that. No aspersions, Lionel, whatsoever. We were known as Lord Lieutenants because all bar one of the originals was a peer of the realm. The only exception was the Lord Lieutenant of Cornwall, who was Sir Walter Raleigh from 1552 till 1618. The role was actually established by an Act of Parliament in 1550, and in 1586, when Queen Elizabeth I was on the throne, with the impending Spanish invasion around the corner, she allows for the appointment of deputies in each county. The number of deputies was governed by the population of the county, which is still exactly the same situation today. So in Hertfordshire, with a population of approaching 1.2 million, I'm allowed to appoint up to 57 deputies. In 1662, the lieutenants were given the control over the military, total control, which was taken away from us by the Forces Act of 1871, although until 1921, we were still allowed to call men to arms. So during the First World War, the lieutenants, or as we were commonly known, Lord Lieutenants, were allowed to call men to arms. In fact, the word Lord, as in Lord Lieutenants, was only added by statute in the 1970s. Lady Lord Lieutenants, and that to me is still a bit of an anachronism, but Lady Lord Lieutenants, the first was appointed in 1974, who I believe was the Lord Lieutenant of Sussex. And now today, there are approximately 40% of the Lord Lieutenants are female. We serve until we are 75. Why 75? Because years ago, it used to be, as long as you were breathing, you were Lord Lieutenant. And the story goes that Her Majesty the Queen and her mother, the Queen Mother, were being shown around a building by a very ancient Lord Lieutenant. The Queen Mother sat down on a couch. He sat down next to her, put his arm around her and said, "Would you like me to introduce you to the Queen, my dear? She's very nice." At which the indignant Queen Mother stood up, went across to her daughter and said, "We have to do something about these doddery old fools." So we're kicked out at 75. A lot of people ask, how did I become Lord Lieutenant? Did I apply for the job? No, basically what happened, my predecessor, the Countess of Verulam, decided to stand down after 10 years in office, sought Her Majesty's permission, and then the head of the Privy Council, who also happened to be the head of the Honours Committee in the Cabinet Office, went round the county talking to everybody and anybody about the challenges for the county and who would make a good Lord Lieutenant. So he spoke to Deputy Lieutenants, High Sheriffs, the Bishop, the Chief Constable, MPs, etc., etc. And one of the Deputy Lieutenants he asked to speak to was me. He looked at me and I gave him what I thought were the challenges coming up for the county. And I gave him the name of 2 or 3 people who I thought would make good Lord Lieutenants, bearing in mind that Hertfordshire has only had a member of the aristocracy as a Lord Lieutenant. So I gave him what I thought were suitable names. And he looked at me and he said, "What about you?" And I just burst out laughing. I said, "Don't be so stupid." I said, "I'm a businessman and I'm not an aristocrat." So he said, "Well, give it some thought." Anyway, 3 names are then sent to the Prime Minister, and they asked if mine could be one of them. I found out who the other 2 were rather surreptitiously, and they were both what I would call landed gentry or from landed gentry families. And I said to my wife, "This is not going to happen. They've ticked the box. They've got the diversity. They've got the businessman." Thought nothing about it. There was then an election in 2017. Theresa May called an election. And the day after the election, after she won the election, I got a handwritten letter from 10 Downing Street. "Can I put your name forward to Her Majesty as Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire?" I can honestly tell you nobody was more shocked than I was. Of course, the answer was yes. And about a week later, I got a letter from Her Majesty saying, "You are now my Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire." And that's it. You don't get any training. You don't get any induction. I got a 380-page manual telling me everything and anything from how to polish my buttons to how to address Her Majesty the Queen, and a very useful but rather ancient DVD which showed me how to get on and off a horse with spurs, which was not terribly useful for riding through the middle of Hertford High Street, but so be it. Talking of spurs, I'm not a military man, and they are extremely difficult to learn to walk in, particularly downstairs. And there's a wonderful story told by Lord Shuttleworth, Charles Shuttleworth, who is the Lord Lieutenant of Lancashire. And he was telling us that on his first day, he had to take the Princess Royal around a medieval castle. And they stood at the top of a spiral medieval staircase. And the one thing you have to be very careful of with spurs on is when you walk downstairs, because they tend to catch. He forgot, put his foot on the first step, and off came one of the spurs and went boing, 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 all the way down the stairs, echoing around. And the Princess Royal, who is rather curt, should I say, turned to her lady in waiting, and at the top of her voice, she said, "You can always tell the new boys." so one has to be careful how one walks downstairs. We're told to develop it in our own way. There's this horrible phrase when we're appointed and we are told, do it in your own way. I have no idea what that means, and I'm still trying to find out, but I'm doing it in my own way. So what are the roles of the Lord Lieutenant or the Lieutenancy in general? Well, our principal role is to uphold the dignity of the Crown. That is our overriding role, and anything we do, that has to be in the back of our mind. I am Her Majesty's personal representative in the county of Hertfordshire, and I will do exactly what Her Majesty tells me. I always say I have two bosses. One sits opposite me at the breakfast table and one sits in Buckingham Palace, and I try to obey them both. There are numerous duties that come with the role, obviously. Royal visits. So we arrange and accompany any royal visitor who comes into the county. We are responsible for them. We are responsible for their well-being for the entire time they are in the county. That's any member of the royal family. So previously, and I'll come back to this a little later, we would have had about 6 or 8 royal visits a year, and they take a lot of planning, particularly as the royal visitors, the members of the royal family, like to, as they put it, and not I, they put it, show the public that they're getting their money's worth. So they normally like to come and do 3, 4, in the case of the Princess Royal, sometimes even 5 visits in a day. Each one has to be planned, has to be programmed, has to be checked, has to be recce'd. They are quite a lot of work, but very enjoyable. Honours. I validate all the honours that come through Hertfordshire. We have to do quite a lot of background investigation to make sure that we know that they are good and true people and worthy of one of the national honours, be it British Empire all the way up to knighthood. Royal Garden Party. Every year we are allowed to appoint, normally it's 96 people from Hertfordshire, to attend Royal Garden parties. Again, we have to go through the list, and the list has to be agreed by Buckingham Palace, so there's a fair amount of due diligence that we have to do prior to sending off the list. And I rely on deputy lieutenants, mayors, council officers, the bishop, various other people to recommend those people who we feel perhaps are not quite good enough for a national honour, but deserve to go to a Royal Garden party. I present all Her Majesty's awards, so that's Queen's Awards for Voluntary Service and Queen's Award for Enterprise. For Enterprise, we are an amazingly successful county, and this afternoon, or lunchtime rather, I did a webinar with the Hertfordshire Chamber of Commerce, and we had on there a number of our winners. We have this year got 9 successful awards rather, for Queen's Award for Enterprise. That's 9 out of 205 for the whole of the United Kingdom. So with the exception of the metropolitan lieutenancies, so London, Manchester, Birmingham, etc., we are the most successful county, which I really think is a tribute to the wonderful businesses and particularly SMEs that we have in this county. So I present Her Majesty's Queen's Awards for Enterprise and Queen's Awards for Voluntary Service. Susie Harvey, who is on this call, is one of the team and will be leading the team, who do an enormous amount of work, investigation into voluntary organisations to see if they meet the criteria. And again, it's highly competitive, and I'm delighted that we in Hertfordshire always end up with quite a few excellent organisations who are awarded the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. Those are extremely pleasurable and enjoyable events because they tend to be celebratory for the staff, for businesses, for the volunteers, very enjoyable. I also present all the British Empire medals, so which is one below an MBE, and occasional MBEs, and in fact that looks as though it might increase at the moment because there's such a backlog. We do it in a very professional way. This is people who do not go to Buckingham Palace, so we do it with a certain amount of protocol, certain amount of grandeur, with the military there, and again, a very enjoyable event. I am head of the military and president of the Reserve and Cadet force in Hertfordshire. Now, Hertfordshire has but one full-time military base. However, it is without doubt the most important military base in the whole of the United Kingdom, and that is Northwood Headquarters, which just fits in Hertfordshire. And I've got a list here of what sits at Northwood Headquarters, for those who don't know. It is the headquarters of Joint Forces Command, of Multinational Command, of Naval Operations Command, of NATO Command, and also of HMS Wildfire. It used to be categorized as a ship. It is no longer, but it is an amazing place. And of course, that's where the bunker, the famous bunker, where Margaret Thatcher led the invasion of the Falklands from in 1982, which sadly has now been bricked up. But that would have been the center of government in the event of a nuclear attack. So a very important base. We also have a significant number of cadets and reserve forces, particularly medical, in the county, and I am president of those, although, as I say, I'm not a military person. I do wear a uniform. You may have seen photos. It's a uniform of a general, which I find rather strange because, as I say, I'm not military, and when I walk around somewhere like Northwood Base and get saluted by colonels and all these other high-ranking officers, I find it rather embarrassing. The uniform is actually very hot, that's what I can say. Those of you who may be ex-military will know far better than I that barathea is not the best material to wear in the middle of summer. And again, a very nice story of one of my fellow Lord Lieutenants who was showing round Her Majesty. And in the summer, instead of wearing a collared and cuffed shirt, we can try and get away with wearing a t-shirt underneath if it's really hot. And this Lord Lieutenant was showing Her Majesty around a very small building, and they got into a lift. It was a very hot day and a very small lift, and there was Her Majesty, her personal protection officer, the Lord Lieutenant, and her private secretary. And the lift got stuck. And Her Majesty was very calm, not at all. The Lord Lieutenant was far from it, and he was absolutely dripping with sweat, really worried. And Her Majesty said to him, Lord Lieutenant, you have my permission to remove your tunic, your jacket, if you wish. And he said, no, ma'am, thank you very much, I won't. It's very kind of you. What she didn't know was that he was wearing a t-shirt which his daughter had given him, on which it said, I'm an old git. Now, I actually think Her Majesty would have laughed her head off, but he didn't take the chance. So the lesson there is if you're going to wear a t-shirt underneath, for goodness sake, make sure it's plain and white. Magistrates. I'm not a magistrate, but traditionally the lieutenancy have a very close relationship with the magistracy. The High Sheriff has a very close relationship with the judiciary, but the magistracy has always come under the auspices of the lieutenancy. And if you remember what I said from the 1540s, you can appreciate why. We just don't trust those magistrates. So I am chairman of the Magistrates Advisory Committee and also chairman of the Magistrates Association in the county. In fact, we now share the advisory committee with Bedfordshire, so the Lord Lieutenant of Bedfordshire and I co-share the advisory committee. We have a relationship with all the uniformed services, of course, and a particularly close relationship, as in fact does the High Sheriff. I'm president of the St John's County Priory Group, and we work quite closely. I work quite closely with St John's. I'm president of Hertfordshire Scouts, and that's something I'm particularly proud of. I'm an ex-scout. I thoroughly enjoy being a cub and a scout. And we have an enormous number of scouts. We have 20,000 scouts in Hertfordshire. We're one of the biggest counties in the country, with another 3,000 or 4,000 on the reserve list, on the waiting list. So the Scouts are a fabulous organisation. And in fact, I've started a thing called Hertfordshire Youth United. And we have put together the 8 uniformed youth organisations in the county. So that's the cadets of the 3 services, that's the Scouts, the Guides, St John's cadets, police cadets, and fire and rescue cadets, to share best practice. And surprising, and they comprise about 32,000 young people in the county. So a really significant group. And surprisingly, they never really have spoken to each other. The 3 military services, of course, have, but the others haven't. And we're now encouraging them to share best practices, to share estates, to share governance where possible. And I think that's proving quite successful. I set it up about a year ago. We've had 3 or 4 meetings and it seems to be going pretty well. Duke of Edinburgh Awards. We are invited to present a lot of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, which again, a very pleasurable experience. Obviously the Gold Awards, they go to Buckingham Palace, but certainly the Bronze Awards. And I'm amazed how many young people are still carrying out Duke of Edinburgh Award. It's marvelous, really. Citizenships. Normally, in normal times, there is at least one citizenship ceremony every Monday in Hatfield. Normally about 30 new citizens in the county, and we are invited to present their new citizenship certificate. Again, it's a very heartwarming, humbling and enjoying experience because these people take it very seriously. They have to. And for them to take up citizenship in a new country is quite a significant move for them. And I find it very emotional. And I think the DLs, the deputy lieutenants who do it as well, I think really very much enjoy that. We work quite closely with the Prince's Trust. So the Prince's Trust have a system, have an organization that works with the Fire and Rescue Service, where they take underprivileged children from all sorts of backgrounds, put them through an 8 or 10 week course, and then we are invited to present their certificates to them. And the amazing transformation of these young people, some of whom I remember very clearly, one had never left their room for 3 years, others who are finding employment difficult, who have learning disabilities, to see them come out of themselves and go through an 8 or 10 week, fairly rigorous process, to see the results at the end when they stand up and have to make a speech about their experience is quite enlightening. And I find that, again, a very humbling experience and a very enjoyable one. So we work quite closely with them. We receive on average between about 500 to 600 invitations a year. Thank goodness I have got some wonderful deputy lieutenants who can help me out with those. I'll come back to that in a minute. We maintain, or I maintain, and the deputies maintain a very close link to the 10 boroughs. We need to know what's going on around the county. A lot of people say, does the Queen care? The Queen certainly does care. I do write to the Queen fairly regularly. I tell her what's going on around the county, and she is interested, particularly in Hertfordshire, because her mother, of course, came from Hertfordshire. Her first cousin was my predecessor's predecessor, Sir Simon Bowes-Lyon, still lives there. And in fact, I think it's no secret to tell you that he has on his wall, I think we all have done it when our children grow up, we mark on the wall to see how tall they are. And he has one on his wall, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's got lots of children. And in one, it says Lilibeth, obviously Her Majesty, that's such a thing. And just above it, it says Margaret, in brackets, in heels. I just think that's lovely. And he's covered that in perspex for posterity. I think that's marvelous. I'm officially the Custos Rotalorum, so I'm officially the keeper of the rolls in the county. I asked my predecessor what that entailed, and she said, I have no idea. Nobody's ever asked me about it. So hopefully nobody will ever ask me, but officially I'm the Custos Rotalorum. We spend a lot of time in the community, promoting good atmosphere, promoting cooperation with the voluntary sector, with the business sector, with the education sector, which again I will come back to in a minute, with the social life of the county. I think if somebody said, what is the thing we do most? What is the one thing? I would say it's facilitation. It's putting people in touch with each other, facilitating and putting people together. The deputy lieutenants I have, and at the moment, I think from memory, there are 41 appointed, have an amazing and vast array of expertise and experience. And what I've done, going back to doing it in your own way, I'm a businessman. So I have looked at the expertise and experience of our amazing deputy lieutenants, and I have created 15 different panels. So every deputy lieutenant will sit in at least 2 panels. 4 of them are covering the 4 areas of the county, because I need to be kept abreast of what is going on in the north, south, east and west. But the other 11 are representative of matters that are important to the county. So just to give you examples, we have an interfaith panel. There are, I'm told, over 25 different practiced religions in the county. We have a social responsibility panel. We have a military panel. We have an honours panel. We have a Commonwealth panel, which is chaired by the High Sheriff, etc., etc. We have an education panel. We had a health panel. And I'm so lucky because I have military people, military deputy lieutenants. I have experts in health, doctors, and those with experience in the hospice sector. I have educationalists. I'm very fortunate, and I have a vast array, and it just makes sense to me to use and encompass their expertise in different, what I call panels, because I hate the word committee. And that works well. We have about, and this is a bit of a figure plucked out of the air, and I hope Susie Harvey won't castigate me for this, but I reckon about 4,500 charities in the county. About 3,600, I think, are registered with the Charity Commission, but we have about another 1,000 which are not. So we have 4,500 charities in the county. I always tell my fellow Lord Lieutenants with great pride that I think that Hertfordshire is without doubt the most diverse county in England. Why do I say that? Because I think we are, basically. I think we have diversity in all aspects. We have diversity in ethnicity, in religion, in language, in wealth, in land. The county is almost split into 2. On the eastern side, we have a lot of large estates. In the west and the central, we have a lot of conurbations, some large conurbations, Watford, Hatfield, Welling, Hemel Hempstead, etc., etc. People always think of Hertfordshire as an area of great wealth and natural beauty, and natural beauty it certainly is, and great wealth there is. But there are also a number of areas of great deprivation. And it may surprise everybody to know that we have 2 areas which are amongst the 10% most deprived in the entire United Kingdom. What amazes me is that you get areas of great deprivation so close to areas of enormous wealth. A prime example is quite close to me in southwest of the county, South Oxley, which is an area quite well known. It's a deprived area, high unemployment, low education standards. 3/4 of a mile away is Moore Park, one of the most affluent areas in the county, where the average house price, I think, is about £3 million. It amazes me that the 2 live so well side by side. So I believe that we are, without doubt, very possibly the most diverse county in the whole of the United Kingdom. And it's something I'm extremely proud of. I think it gives Hertfordshire its character. I think it gives it its feeling. I think it gives it its strength. And it's something which I believe we need to build on. As I said before, I'm allowed 57 deputies. At the moment, we have 41. The deputies also retire at the age of 75. They go on to the supplemental list. They maintain their post-nominal DL. And it means that I'm regularly looking for new deputy lieutenants. And again, I take into account the diversity. I think one has to look back at the lieutenancy. Years ago, the lieutenancy was populated, and I'm not going back as far as Henry VIII, but I'm staying within the last 50, 80 years, and perhaps even less, was populated by the aristocracy and the landed gentry. And to some extent, that is still true. If you look at the names of the Lord Lieutenants, there are several counts, several earls, several dukes, quite a few senior military people, and now, of course, many ladies and dames and countesses. But the fact that I was appointed as a businessman and a non-aristocrat, and a number of others are now being appointed in that way, I think shows that diversity is being accepted by the royal family. If you look at the royal family itself, and of course we are representatives, direct representatives of the royal family, it's only 66 years ago that Princess Margaret was refused permission to marry Group Captain Townsend, a divorcee. I would just say, without going to any depth, look at, for example, who the Queen's grandson has recently married. And you can see that the diversity is spread into the royal family as well and across the country. And I think Her Majesty the Queen accepts and acknowledges that. And therefore, the lieutenancies generally are changing, but we are a mixed bunch. To show you what a mixed bunch we are, I'll give you an example. We have an annual general meeting of Lord Lieutenants, which normal circumstances takes place at St James's Palace or Buckingham Palace. And we don't know who each other are. We may have met, and it's normally first name terms. And I sat down next to, well, I would say unofficially a rather scruffy looking Lord Lieutenant. And he was called Richard. And we were chatting away, and very nice chap. And we got onto the subject of land. And Richard said to me, do you have much land? And I said, well, we have about an acre. It's very nice. Thank you very much. And I said, and you? And he said, oh, a little more. End of subject. When I got home, I looked up Richard, the Duke of Buccleuch, who has 230,000 acres. I think that really shows that we are a rather diverse group, but it works. Entrepreneurship is something I'm very keen on. I mentioned the Queen's Awards for Enterprise and how successful we've been, and we are promoting that to a great extent. We did promotion today. I've set up a thing called the Lord Lieutenant's Entrepreneurs Challenge, which takes place every year at the county show, where we bring on young entrepreneurs. I believe the old cliche, they are the future of this county, or they are the future of this country, is absolutely true. I'm a governor of the University of Hertfordshire, and we have a very good entrepreneurial incubator site there. And we predicted during lockdown that we would have about 25 new companies in the incubator site setting up. I can tell you, as of 2 weeks ago, there were 78. There are a lot of bright young people in this county, in the country as well. And I think we have a responsibility to encourage them and to give them a chance and help them along. So I'm very, very keen on promoting entrepreneurship. Just going back to the royal family. The royal family, of course, is changing. And this affects the role of the Lord Lieutenant and the Deputy Lieutenants. If one thinks of the royal family as an inverted pyramid, with the Queen at the head, and she's assisted by her cousins, that's the Duke of Gloucester, the Duke of Kent, Prince Michael of Kent, and the Ogilvies, or no, it's just, he's died, of course. And then it was her 4 children, and they were carrying out a raft of duties, not only around the UK, but around the world. Her Majesty is soon to be, well, she's 95. Her cousins are all in their 80s, with the exception of the Duke of Gloucester. Her children, well, one of them is no longer active in royal duty. Their spouses are, well, 2 of them are active. And Sir Tim Lawrence is becoming more active. And then you go down to their children, and now only one of Her Majesty's grandchildren is really that active as a working member of the royal family, and that's Prince William and, of course, his wife. Other grandchildren are not going to be active royals, so Princess Anne's made it quite clear her children are not going to be active. It means that the public are going to see less and less of the royal family face to face. It means that royal visits will become fewer and fewer. I'm pleased to say we have certainly 1 organised in Hertfordshire and hopefully another 2 in the pipeline. But it means they are also going to be far more restrictive in what they do, the royal family. They're going to be particular that they will want to only attend events which are pertinent to their patronages, for example. And therefore of course, we will have to see what role Prince Charles, when he ascends to the throne, which we hope will be many years yet, but when he ascends to the throne, what his attitude will be. But he's already announced that he wants to shrink the monarchy, the working monarchy. It will create a much more important role as far as the public are concerned for the lieutenancy, because we will be, to all intents and purposes, the face of the monarchy. And that presents us with a number of challenges, and something that we have to address and realize that when we now go and see people and address people, we will be there as the monarch, because the monarch is unlikely to be seen. Patronages are important. I'm now patron of 25 different organizations. They're all marvelous. They all do great work. And it keeps me, I would say it keeps me busy. Have things changed? And I think Gordon said to me, look how things have changed over the last 3 years since I addressed you last. Yes, obviously, COVID has impacted all of us. I mean, that goes without saying. And yes, we've all spent our lives looking at these blessed screens. And thank goodness for Zoom and Teams and all the rest of it. But I think we're all getting a bit fed up with it now. I think my record was I did 29 Zooms in a week, 6 in a day, and ended up with a thumping headache. So I think, like most of us, I can't wait to get out there, shake a few hands, and actually see people in the flesh. We're going to have a very busy time as a lieutenancy. We've got to catch up on a lot of presentations on behalf of Her Majesty over the last 18 months. And Her Majesty wants us to go out and thank people. Excuse me. Thanking people is a very important part of our role. Everybody likes to be thanked. Everybody likes a pat on the back, particularly if it comes from a representative of Her Majesty the Queen. I set up a thing called the Hero of Hertfordshire Awards, which we sent out to over 500 individuals who had done something really special and over the top during COVID crisis. It was very well received. We've curtailed that now, and we have now morphed into thank you cards, which will go to organizations. The big problem is if you do it to individuals, and we were talking about this with the NHS, if you go to a hospital, you go to the Lister or you go to Watford General, how many people do you thank individually? Every doctor, nurse, clinician, porter, chef, cook, car park attendant, you just go on and on and on. So it has to be done as a group, but thanking people we will, and I'm encouraging the deputy lieutenants and I to get out there as soon as we're able and shake hands and just say, on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen, we thank you. I'd like to talk about something else before I come back to that, which I meant to say. Education. I said we have an education panel, which is chaired by Joe Connell. We believe education to be a very, very important factor of our work, and Her Majesty agrees. I'm very concerned, and a number of us are very concerned, that when Her Majesty dies, which she will, sadly, we're all going to die, hopefully not for many years to come, the popularity of the monarchy will drop. There's no question about that. Her Majesty is without doubt the greatest monarch, perhaps in living in history. She is loved by everybody. She is admired by everybody. Her funeral will be the largest single event in world history. They're talking about audiences of between 3 and 4 billion. It's going to be quite significant, but I'm concerned that people will lose respect for the monarchy. And a lot of people, particularly young people, actually don't realize that when Her Majesty dies, the monarchy continues and the role of the monarchy. So I tasked Joe Connell and her education panel, to come up with a way of educating young people into the monarchy, the Commonwealth, which again, most people, and I'm sure Lionel will agree with me, are rather ignorant about, and community and civil society. So we've created and we've been doing this for a couple of years. We've created 2 packages, one for senior school, one for junior school, where we go in, the deputy lieutenants and I, without me, go in and we give them a lecture, or with the younger ones, we may have a quiz to try and teach them the importance of the monarchy, that the monarchy is continuity, the role of the monarchy, and also the importance of the Commonwealth, and that there are 54 countries of the Commonwealth and Her Majesty is head of the Commonwealth, etc., etc. And that, I think, is a very important task we undertake, and that is rolling out very successfully, obviously interrupted by COVID. And another thing we've just completed, is a survey of young people and how they've been affected by COVID and their fears for the future. We held some focus groups with 100 young people at different 4 or 5 at a time in different schools, colleges, groups. And the results have been so interesting that they're now being published by the Local Enterprise Partnership and will be sent to every school, business and youth organisation in the county. Quite a significant, what started off as just a sort of a, let's see what happens, has become quite a significant document. So I'm very proud of that. And I think it shows that the Lieutenancy have a role within the community, within society, that we need to fulfill. I think if there is anything that has come out of this terrible COVID situation, is probably the community spirit. I think we've seen that across the county and across the country. And I think that is something that we are very conscious we mustn't lose. We must keep people's community spirit up. We must keep them aware of each other. I mean, we all know examples of food banks and many, many other wonderful things. And to me, the great and the most humbling aspect of this is it's not only the people at the top of the ladder, it's the people at the bottom of the ladder who have nothing but give. And that to me is the most humbling part of my role, to meet these people who literally have nothing and yet still give of their time, of their money they have. I find that absolutely, well, I find it humbling to say the least. So we have to stay relevant. I think it's very important that we do stay relevant. So we have increased our social media presence. Whether you love it or hate it, social media is here to last. We need to reach out to young people. We need to reach out to difficult to vulnerable people. We have a very good social media presence, whether it's on Twitter. We now have a very active website. I'm very lucky. One of my deputy lieutenants, Akhtar Zaman, is a genius with websites and keeps our website absolutely up to date. And I can tell you, I gave a presentation to the Lord Lieutenants Association, and we are the envy of many, many of the other Lord Lieutenancies with our website. And I think that's important. We have to stay relevant to today. We have to be seen. So for example, I'm very keen that we attend as many remembrance services as possible. So we attended, myself and the deputy lieutenants, and we work it out quite methodically, attended 32 remembrance services last November. That to me is very important as a show of Her Majesty's respect for our armed forces and what they have done and what they continue to do. So we need to be seen out and about. And of course, we've got coming up next year, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which we're already planning and working on, and the Queen's Green Canopy, which we're also working on, the planting of many, many thousands of trees. I'm nearly ended now. So my mission statement when I got into this role was to take the lieutenancy to the people of Hertfordshire. And I think I will be in role, hopefully, unless Her Majesty sees otherwise, for 11 years in total. If I can achieve taking the lieutenancy to the people of Hertfordshire, I shall be delighted. We are, as Lord and Deputy Lieutenants, a privileged group of people. There's no question about it. We have huge expertise. We have huge contacts. And as I said, facilitating is a key role that we have to play. So we need to get out there and we need to say to the people of Hertfordshire, here we are, we're representing Her Majesty the Queen. What can we do to help you? I think it's getting there, slowly but surely. I take pride, huge pride, in being offered this amazing responsibility, which I never even dreamed about, to serve, without doubt, the world's greatest ever monarch. And it's meetings like this which get us out and about. And I thank you for your time, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Lord Lieutenant, thank you very much. You certainly have a very rewarding and varied role in the county, and thanks for sharing with us. Before I open up to questions, I'd just like to reach out and welcome some of our guests tonight. Lionel Wallace, who's the High Sheriff of Hertfordshire, who's just enrolled a month. Welcome, Lionel. Susie Harvey, our Deputy Lord Lieutenant from Bishop Stortford, and Keith Brownlee, our Rotary District Governor. So welcome all three of you. Thank you. Right, questions. A show of hands is probably the best way. Keith Brownlee, could you unmute please as well?
Thank you very much indeed, Lord Lieutenant Robert. Very fascinating insight into the role. Interestingly, comparisons with Rotary are very relevant here, because Rotary is actually very much out, trying to change its image and trying to engage very much with a younger audience, interestingly enough. But certainly, diversity in Rotary is equally relevant for our organisation, and actually keeping up community spirit, getting out there and actually really engaging with the community. If I could ask one sort of question of you, you probably know Rotary very well, and of course, I'm District Governor of Essex and East Hart, so Jennifer Tolhurst, your colleague, is obviously another part of that equation. But if you had to give one priority to Rotary to perhaps address, what would it be? And I'd be very interested to hear what you've got to say in that regard. Thank you.
I don't know Rotary as well as I perhaps ought to. So I will answer you from an uneducated position. But I think, as you say, you have in a way, a sort of a reflective, similar role to us. I think it's engaging with people. I think it's putting people together. I mean, you and your colleagues here know a vast number of people, but in your own communities. And I think that's very important. I and the Deputy Lieutenants are working in a community of 1.2 million people. Yes, we all have our own small communities, which we know particularly well. Rotary tends to be fairly local, and I think that's an important issue. I think, as I said, there are so many different aspects within each community. To give that example of South Oxley and Moor Park, 3/4 of a mile away, they could not be more different. And I think to try and reach out to both those communities in a way is something that Rotary can do. You have that reach through your members. You have that reach. Your members have different interests. They have different backgrounds, in much the same way as the Lieutenancy. They have different relationships, and I think that is important. I think reaching out to those organizations and just telling them that you are there, you're there to help, and if necessary, facilitating, putting them in touch with, whether it's us, whether it's the Lieutenancy, whether it's the Shrievalty, whoever it is. I'm amazed, I'm continually amazed at how many people I can put in touch with each other. I mean, I give a typical example, as I gave, of the youth, Hertfordshire Youth United. 8 uniformed youth organisations had never spoken to each other, most of them. We put them together in a room and bingo, they're now talking about sharing estates, they're talking about governance together, it's amazing when you put people together, it's amazing what happens. So I would say if there's one aspect that Rotary and share with the Lieutenancy, that's probably it. It's engaging with people and putting people together.
Thank you very much.
Peter Latham, I think, has got a question.
Yes, thanks for that talk. You are quite right. We did hear you speak some time ago, but I really enjoyed this because the reinforcement really came across in how relevant the work is you're doing now, and particularly in the current circumstances. But the thing that would interest me is you did say your role is supporting the monarch and particularly protecting the dignity of the monarch. You also said that, slightly jocularly, that keeping the High Sheriff in line is also part of your responsibilities. the Crown under our Constitution has certain exceptional powers in exceptional circumstances, when, for instance, the nation's at peril or difficulty with governments. I wonder if you have some part in this, and should the monarch need, under these what would be unexpected and unusual circumstances, need to act, are you sort of ready as a group to jump in and support the monarch in whatever role she might have to fulfill to save the nation?
Well, the High Sheriff and I both carry a sword, if that helps. In a way, yes. In a way, no. We are not military, but I am president of the Reserve and Cadet Force. So we would muster the reserves to the best of our ability. What's interesting, and what you say is very interesting, the Duke of Edinburgh has just passed away, as we all know. And I think we were amazed at the amount of respect and outpouring of condolence for the Duke of Edinburgh. And I don't think many people realize exactly how much he had done. You know, 22,500 events, 800 charities he'd been patron of, etc., etc., etc. I don't think many people, myself included, realize the role that the Queen undertakes. Yes, everybody's seen The Crown, and sadly, many people believe that to be gospel. More so on the other side of the Atlantic, probably, than this side. But let's hope it's never put to task. But yes, we are Her Majesty's representatives. I'm Her Majesty's representative in Hertfordshire. And if she called on me to do something, yes, I would be obliged to do it, and I certainly would do it. Would I be able to call men to arms? No. I would leave that certainly to the military experts. We remain apolitical, as Her Majesty does. We're not allowed to get involved in any political discussion, and I can't appoint any deputy lieutenant who has any political role, even in local government. So I think the answer is yes, but I'm not quite sure what we would be asked to do. I hope it's not firing a gun, because I'm not quite sure I wouldn't shoot myself in the foot. But as I say, Lionel and I are here ready with our swords, should she come wanting.
Could I just say I've shared being a governor at University of Hertfordshire with Lord Lieutenant, and he does put up a good fight.
There says the ex-chairman of the Finance Committee, I have to say.
Michael Chapman's got a question.
Yeah, I better disclose the fact that, first of all, I'm from Essex. I am a DL, but you'll be very surprised to know that I'm actually over 75. So I'm sort of very much in the reserve thing. But first of all, can I say thank you so much, because very good talk and so on, and particularly about Spurs, because we in Essex had a little discussion about Spurs, and we were told by Mr. Voss that we had to wear Spurs, and I looked it up, and it was only when you meet the Queen that you had to wear Spurs, and on other occasions it's suggested you shouldn't, presumably because of the Spurs going down the stairs. And I'm very pleased that you somehow managed to not actually suggest or show our Vice Lord Lieutenant when he was wearing his Spurs, and he ended up bollarded, I think it was called, on that. But the other interesting thing is that I note that you've got a beard.
Yes.
And I looked at regulations when I had a beard, and realized why Prince Andrew is the only one who's got a beard, and looked up the regulations. And one of my fellow deputies said to me, "Oh, Michael, what on earth are you doing? You've got a beard." And I said, "I'm terribly sorry, but if I told you why I've got a beard, I'd have to shoot you." Because apparently, as a member of the armed forces, which we are, you can only have a beard if you've served in Afghanistan or somewhere like that. So that was quite a useful thing to do. But thank you very much indeed. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And we do have a great role to play. And I always write to the palace after I've done an event, and there's always a letter back. and to see people's faces when they get a letter back from the private secretary saying that the Queen was particularly interested in what they've been doing and all the rest of it. And it makes a huge difference to people. And provided the DLs carry off the role properly, it can do only good for the community. So thank you for a most interesting talk. Thank you much indeed.
Well, thank you. And I agree with you. I mean, one cannot underestimate the fact that Her Majesty is held in such high esteem that anybody who gets a letter from Her Majesty, and I would say, and I hope you would agree, even a visit from Her Majesty's representatives, take it very, very much to heart. And a couple of interesting things is I did an event recently, or not so recently now, with the Princess Royal, and she made a very interesting comment to me, because as you may know, if you've met the Princess Royal, I'm sure you have,
yeah,
she's incredibly efficient and knows exactly what she's doing, the hardest working royal without a question of doubt. And she said, or her private secretary said, she will do a room of 100 people in 50 minutes and she will speak to everybody. And she said to me, I know that the people I speak to, the chances are highly probable it is the only time they will ever speak face to face to a member of the royal family.
Yep.
They will remember for the rest of their lives every single word I say to them. And she said, therefore, I'm very conscious of what I say to them, because they will take that home, tell their family, and forever they will remember every word that I said to them. And I thought that was very interesting. So she particularly, but all of them really do put a lot of thought into it all. Michael, you might also be interested to know that it has just been passed that the Lady Lord Lieutenants and Lady Deputy Lieutenants can now wear a uniform.
Well, I was expecting that to come, but I hadn't realised it had actually come.
Just been passed.
Which is excellent, because it does make a huge difference.
Well, it does to, I mean, my predecessor, the Countess of Verulam, is 6'1" and wore lovely feathery hats and never had any problem when she went into a room being noticed as the Lord Lieutenant. My poor neighbour, Helen Nellis, who's the Lord Lieutenant of Bedfordshire, is about 5'1", and once told me that she's fed up with, when she goes into a room, she gets shoved to one side and they say, can you move out the way? The Lord Lieutenant's coming. And she says, I am the Lord Lieutenant. And they look at her and they say, so yes, I think some of the ladies are delighted, some are not so delighted.
But the uniform, of course, doesn't always make the thing, because I had a visit to the People's Republic of Harlow. I got to the parking, all in uniform, saw the lot, and of course had to put the number of my parking space plus my registration in the thing and pay for the parking ticket. And I was getting a little bit flustered by it. And a dear lady came up to me and explained how it was all done. And then she pulled out the ticket and handed it to me. She said, if you go into that shop over there, dear, and pay at least 20 quid, they'll give you the money back for your parking. And I had to turn to her and say, Madam, do I look as though I'm going to be going to the shops?
Ian Priest has got a question.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to echo everybody's thanks for a most interesting talk, which illuminated what is clearly a very important role. My question is actually rather a mundane one. I take it that the role is not remunerated, but it's clearly a very, very busy one, and you are someone of an age who is still, I assume, still in work, and therefore have professional obligations and preoccupations. And I just wonder how you fit it all in.
It's very kind of you. I actually retired 6 years ago.
Well, lucky you is all I can say.
I will tell you that I will be 69 on my next birthday, if that helps you.
I was beguiled by the fact you said you'd still got 11 years to do.
No, I said I will have done 11 years in total.
I beg your pardon. Okay. Well, I got the sums wrong.
In answer to your question, I always say to people, now I've cut it down to 8 days a week, it's easy. Before that, it was quite difficult. It is a full-time, well, for me, it's a full-time role. My wife tells me I've created a rod for my own back because I'm trying to do too much. And I have to say I'm supported by some wonderful deputy lieutenants, but the way we've structured it, it actually has given all of us a lot more work, which I think we all enjoy. There's no question about it. It's not remunerated. I do get travel expenses in exactly the same way as the MPs. It actually goes through the same office of the Cabinet Office. So I fill in the same form, give details of every visit I've made. Other than that, part of my uniform is paid for once, and that's about it. The rest is basically down to me, including entertainment. And yes, it's something that when you take the role on, you take into account. There are some Lord Lieutenants who are in full-time employment and Lord Lieutenant. How they do it, I don't know. I certainly couldn't do it the way I do it, and perhaps they do it in a totally different way. They may not be quite as busy as we are, but as I say, my mission statement of taking the lieutenancy to the people does mean we are and going to continue to be very busy. However, it is such an honour and so enjoyable, and I'm sure my deputies would agree that I wouldn't change it for the world.
Thank you.
Colin George has got a question.
I was extremely impressed by the coherence of vision that you have of the role, and quite clearly you have a lot of, as you spelled out at the beginning, quite a lot of freedom to define the way that you feel it should be orientated after you fulfil the obvious parts of the role. But I was wondering how much you share that vision with, either by accident or by design, with other Chief Lieutenant, Lord High Lieutenants around the country, because quite clearly many of the social issues are common, but many are different. We have particular issues of North and South and so on, and I think you did really spell out in a way that I didn't understand the potential of your role, which was so impressive about the vision that you have for what it could achieve. But I wonder how much it's shared around your colleagues.
What I have learned is that every county, every lieutenancy is totally different and independent. You know, if I talk to the Lord Lieutenant of Suffolk, their main problem is the stealing of combine harvesters. If I talk to the Lord Lieutenant of Greater Manchester, he has slightly different problems. In fact, he addressed us yesterday, Sir Warren Smith, and a lot of his discussion was about how they reacted to the Manchester bombing. It's not something that one can even begin to think about. So I think every lieutenancy is different. We all have the same principle of respecting the dignity of the Crown, serving Her Majesty, etc., etc., and we all have the same roles with the magistracy and with the military. Of course, other counties have a vastly different military to us. The Lord Lieutenant of Lincolnshire has a number of bases there. So each county is individual. We're doing it in different ways, and a lot of it does depend on our background. I couldn't even begin to think that I would have the same methodology, if you like, as the Colonel, who is the Lord Lieutenant of Cornwall, or as the Duchess of Northumberland, up in Northumberland, or my neighbour in Berkshire, who is the Countess Howe. They've got different experiences. The fact that we say do it in your own way, actually, although it doesn't mean very much, it does mean quite a lot, because it means you bring your own experience to it. What we've started to do, and if anything, this is thanks to COVID, we've started to talk to each other a lot more. I've set up a group in the east of England, 8 of us. We get together about every 6 or 8 weeks, and we just share best practice, and we talk about what we're doing, because there's no guidebook, there's no guide to tell you. Nobody's going to turn around and tell you you're doing this wrong or you're doing this right. The only one who will is Her Majesty, and if she does, you're in trouble. So we have to learn from each other, and it's very interesting when we have these informal chats, and I started it about 6 or 8 months ago, and they're very, very informative, because I'm learning a lot from them and they're learning a lot from me. What we did with our Hertfordshire Heroes of Hertfordshire Awards was copied by about 3 other lieutenancies. One of the other lieutenancies has had a particular fundraising award with their community foundation, so everybody does something different. We've all got the same aim. We're all serving Her Majesty. So it depends, I think, on people's background, of course, on the county and the population and the diversity of the county. In Hertfordshire, we have a very diverse community. My neighbour in Bedfordshire has Luton. Luton has its own problems, of course, with the community. So every county is different, and we all do it in our own, exactly what it says on the tin. We do it in our own way. One day somebody will turn around and say to me, "You're doing this completely and utterly wrong." I hope not, but it may
I
happen.
don't think so.
You never know.
Thank you.
Lord Lieutenant, thanks very much. And I doubt whether you're going to get that letter or phone calls to say you're doing it completely wrong. So thank you very much. And your talk has been really appreciated by everyone. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Could I just let people know that our next speaker will be on the evening of the 8th of June, when the talk will be led by Penny Carey, Dean of the School of Law from the University of Hertfordshire. And I can assure you that will be another excellent talk. So that just leaves me to invite you all to raise your glass and toast Her Majesty the Queen. The Queen.
The Queen.
The Queen.
Queen.
Thank you all and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.